Hello, thank you very much for tuning in. Stuart, the Unrepentant Atheist, and this live stream. I've decided to do live stream rather than record it and upload later, simply because I've just watched the discussion between Alex O'Connor and Francis Collins on Does God Exist? So I've just watched it and I've made some notes. I've decided to do this live stream just in case anybody happens to be watching. And obviously, I will be making some comments on the discussion that they had, and obviously talking about my own views on all of the points. Not all of the points, but most of the points that they covered, I would say. So yeah, Francis Collins, who is a scientist, I believe that he started off in physics, and as he said, he did not like the abstract nature of physics. He wanted to go into some field that was a bit more kind of human oriented. So I believe that he went into biology, and eventually he became a doctor, and he has worked on human genetics, the Human Genome Project, etc. So he's a fully legit and respected world scientist. But what we all find interesting about him, in a way, well, not in a way, as atheists and in skeptical circles, what we find interesting about him is not his scientific achievements. What we find interesting is that he's a theist and he's also a respected scientist. So we obviously want to know, what is it in science he finds that points to the existence of God? Obviously, Christians are very much interested in Francis Collins as well, because from their point of view, if a well esteemed scientist is a theist, then it lends some credibility to their own theism. Personally, I don't think it does, but that's another matter. So anybody that's watching now, welcome, and you can make comments in the chat if you've seen this. If you've seen this conversation, if you want to say anything about it or anything about what I'm saying, then that's fine. You can contribute to the live chat. I'm probably reaching an audience at the moment who don't usually see my live streams, because normally I do them late at night in the UK in order to cater for the American viewers who are between 8 and 16 hours behind. So I will now hopefully have people in Europe picking up on this stream who don't usually see what I'm doing. Okay, if you're wondering, that thing behind me, that black rod with something at the top of it, that is a tripod with a camcorder on top. I have another YouTube channel which I use that for. I don't I don't use that camcorder to record any of my streams or any of my videos on this channel. But anyway, that is sitting there because I use my accommodation to make various YouTube videos on another channel that I've got. So let me just go on then. So of course, Alex O'Connor, we know who he is. He's a young man who became famous through establishing a YouTube channel. He's got nearly, I think, 1 million subscribers. We've seen him on British television, and he seems to be quite popular. He's done a theology and philosophy degree at the University of Oxford. Nobody seems to know what grade he got in that degree. He's not said whether he got a first. I would have thought if he did get a first, he would have said so, but he's not said. He was described on this particular channel and introduced as an Oxford philosopher. I think that's stretching it a little bit. Okay, so he's got a Bachelor of Arts in philosophy from Oxford University. I don't really think that kind of makes him an Oxford philosopher. If he was on the teaching staff at Oxford University, I would be impressed. He isn't. Why not? I suppose because he's busy doing other things. But the other point is that there may well have been other students in the faculty who are basically a lot smarter than he is. But that's taking nothing away from Alex. I think that he is. It's good to have him on our side, as it were. I think that generally he does a good job. He seems to have softened his position a bit on theism, I've noticed, and I noticed it in this discussion. So let's just go on then. First of all, there's a website called Mighty Pursuit. Now, this discussion is hosted on this YouTube channel called Mighty Pursuit. He's got about 17,000 subscribers, which I suppose isn't that many. Okay, I know I haven't even got 4,000, but in the big scheme of things, relatively speaking, 17,000 is not that many. If we think that Matt Dillahunty's got nearly 200,000, and Alex himself has got nearly 1 million, yeah, it's not that big, but it doesn't matter. Size doesn't matter, as they say. It's the quality and the content. And that's why I keep doing what I do, because I actually believe I do decent quality content, even if I haven't got too many subscribers. Right, let me just have a quick drink. Yeah, so the Mighty Pursuit. Okay, I went to follow the link to the website. If you look in the description below, you'll see two links. One is to this conversation between Alex O'Connor and Francis Collins, and the other one is to the website of the Mighty Pursuit. I decided to go and have a look because I sense some bias to theism and Christianity when I was listening to this discussion, something that the hosts commented on once or twice, seems to be a bit more biased towards theism than atheism. So I went to see the Mighty Pursuit. What is it? It seems to be an organization that is promoting the teachings of Jesus, but not the sort of Christian message. The claim is that in the early times in the first 1 or 2 centuries after the death of Jesus, there were followers of Jesus, and the name that Mighty Pursuit has given this is the Way of Jesus. I don't know whether they believe in the resurrection, but they definitely believe that Jesus existed and that there's wisdom in life to be had through the teachings of Jesus. I haven't read the whole of their philosophy and their approach to life. So if any of you want to go and check that out, that's fine. I don't know to what extent they believe in the supernatural claims. I wasn't able to find that out in the limited time I was prepared to spend researching this. So let's just go on then. So yeah, Alex and Francis Collins, what did they really start talking about first of all? So yes, Alex made this statement that, yeah, now is he an atheist? Is he an agnostic? And he seems to be more leaning towards the label of being an agnostic rather than an atheist. And he made this statement that what pushes him to agnosticism rather than atheism as a label is that there are inexplicable mysteries about the universe, about reality, whatever that is. So this makes him more of an agnostic than an atheist. He didn't really properly account for why that is. I also admit that there are mysteries currently not explainable. So when Alex says inexplicable, it points to something which is never going to be explained, possibly. So I don't say these things are inexplicable. I say we currently have no explanation for where the universe came from, whether it began or whether it's always been here, and lots of other questions. How life arose, we don't know exactly. But I must say, in my case, these inexplicable mysteries, or mysteries that we have not explained, don't make me incline more to agnosticism than atheism. I still don't believe in the existence of God. I'm happy to say I'm an atheist. There are mysteries out there. And I don't necessarily think that because there are mysteries out there, it means that there's likely to be a supernatural explanation or some explanation outside of our own reality. So I'm still a full-blown atheist, and I don't tend to describe myself as an agnostic. But Alex is now describing himself as an agnostic. He seems to be sort of softening his position. Okay, so Francis Collins. Yeah, so Francis Collins is obviously a Christian. He was an atheist at one time, as he says, and he had an experience. He had a personal experience. And he says that about his personal experience, that he heard the voice of God in his head. And the voice of God said to him, what? Let's have a look. What did he say? I've written it down here somewhere. Yeah, so the voice of God said to him something to the effect that you don't have much. Yeah, here we are. Yeah, okay, I've got it. I've written it down here. Okay. So in his head, he heard these words: "Don't waste your time. Um, you may not have much time left." And he deduced, or he concluded, that he could not have made those words up, and that therefore God must have put those words in his head, or must have said those words. This was enough to convince him that there is a God. Okay, well, this is one of the differences between somebody like me and somebody like Alex and Francis Collins. If I heard those words in my head, I would presume that my own consciousness, my own cognitive function had actually produced those words. I would not, because look, if you go out and you're walking around, you're out for a walk, you can kind of get lost in your thoughts. You start looking around, you see the river, and you start looking at that. That takes you away from your thoughts. But in a way, the thoughts are still there. So, it's almost like your mind is capable of producing these words without you sort of consciously doing so. And I would not presume, if I heard, it would have to be something really special. As Alex was saying, that he would only accept this as evidence for a God if the words were very, very specific enough to convince him that he could not have come up with this. And in my case, yes. If the words were really distinct, and for example, there was a prophecy, let's say, okay, let's go back to 1997, before Princess Diana died. And 2 days or 1 day before Princess Diana died, I had a voice in my head that said, Princess Diana is going to die in a car crash in Paris tomorrow. Okay, fine. Now, if I heard that in my head, I would think, oh, that's a bit strange. But yeah, I'll keep that in my mind. And then the next day, sure enough, Princess Diana died. That would shake me up quite a bit, because I would have to say that would just be too specific. As a random thought, it would be too specific to write off or to explain, possibly as just a random thought, that it might potentially have some external source. It would have to be that impressive in order for me to conclude that it was something that I hadn't produced myself. But as Francis Collins said, every time Alex rebutted something that Collins said, he accused Alex of coming to his evaluation of evidence or claims with what he calls priors. Now, I wonder what this is. What is Alex's priors? Well, Collins explained that. Yeah, you're coming at this from a skeptical kind of materialist point of view. You're coming with priors. You expect a sort of scientific level of evidence, as if this is a bad thing. Like this is your bias, you skeptics. You're coming to my supernatural claims. You're coming to the New Testament. You're coming to my personal experience and my description of it with these priors, this awful bias that you want actual real evidence, and that somehow your position is therefore not tenable because you want this evidence of a sufficient standard for you to believe it. These are your priors. Well, what are Francis Collins' priors? Well, he's coming to all of his evidence with his own priors. And as he said, he needs and he wants an explanation for the fact that there's a universe, for the fact that there's existence. He wants an explanation, and he must have an explanation for the fact that we feel deeply inside when we experience great music or we perceive art. He won't accept any reductionist, materialist explanation for this. He won't accept that there is such an explanation that could satisfy him sufficiently. He needs there to be an explanation that goes beyond what we have in the material world. And for him, this explanation has got to be big and impressive, and it's got to be godlike, or it has to be God. He can't accept that we perceive beauty and that there is such a thing as beauty without there being a God. This is one of his big things, one of his prayers when he's coming to the New Testament, the resurrection story, etc. This is his bias. It seems to me when he's coming to evidence for God. Now, it was admitted, and Alex admitted that if Alex is going to come to belief in God, and he said that he's a non-resistant non-theist, okay, meaning that he's not resisting belief in God, but he's waiting for some kind of evidence to convince him that a God exists. That a philosophical argument is unlikely to convince not just Alex, but anybody, is not going to convince anybody to go from atheism to theism. Maybe that's not quite true. Maybe there are people who have, in fact, through a philosophical argument, come to theism. But I take Alex's point, and it would be the same with me, that I think it's highly unlikely that any philosophical argument, no matter how robust, is going to really make me feel that there is a God who loves us and who cares about us and who we can pray to. It might kind of intellectually convince me that, okay, take the cosmological argument, which I don't accept. But let's say that I was convinced by the cosmological argument that there's a God that started, that there's a cause to the universe. That wouldn't mean that I would necessarily accept that there's a God up there that we can pray to. I say, okay, fine. I'm exhausted with you theists. I'm exhausted with the cosmological argument. Okay, I want to get out of this. There's a God, but it's like a deistic God, or it's a God that is the cause of everything, but I've got no reason to believe that it plays any kind of active part in our life. I'm out of here. Okay, you win. I'm going. All right, well, I'm not saying that, but I guess that there are some atheists who got fed up and have said, okay, I'm fed up with it all. There is some kind of cause to the universe that may be a God, but I don't accept Christianity. And I don't accept necessarily that there's an afterlife or anything like that. But okay, yeah, I can accept that. Now I'm out of here. I'm fed up with it all. And I get that because I often get fed up with it all as well. But I'll never surrender my principle that unless I'm really properly convinced intellectually that I'm going to accept that something's true, if it hasn't met its burden of proof, even just for a quiet life, so I can get on with this, get rid of this channel and just get on with my life and leave it all behind me. So Alex is almost, I think, sometimes teetering on the edge of that he sometimes, I don't know, teases Christians that he is going to actually convert to theism, but he never actually does. He says, oh yeah, there's some impressive arguments, and okay, yes, let's just get on to fine tuning. So for Francis Collins, he says that, look, either there's a God that fine-tuned the universe, or there's a multiverse. Now, if there's a multiverse and an infinite number of universes out there, of many, many types, of many, many tunings, and this one, finally, out of all the millions out there, finally we got one that nailed it for existence, that we could have order, we could have laws, and there could eventually be life. And finally, out of all these millions of universes, we finally got one, and therefore we don't need a God. Well, I don't really accept that dichotomy, that either there's a God or there's a multiverse. I don't accept that dichotomy. But let's supposing that there is that dichotomy. I still think that a multiverse, because it only appeals to the material world, it doesn't appeal to the supernatural. It's still more reasonable than a God. But I don't think that a multiverse is particularly reasonable. Some people do, but I don't think there's any reason to believe that is the case. As for why everything is exactly as it is, I think Alex made some interesting arguments, one of which is God constrained in any way? Because obviously the God of classical theism is supposed to be able to do anything which is logically possible. But it would seem that God is constrained by the physical laws. God needed to have certain physical laws in order for life to evolve. If God was really all powerful, um, this wouldn't be necessary. He could, God could have the universe in such a way that humans would eventually, or God could just literally manifest a ready-made universe with human beings in it already. I think that's what Alex is getting at. There's no need for this convoluted Big Bang and then 13.8 billion years of expansion. And then finally, after all this empty time, we've got life evolving on Earth, and then we've got human beings. We've got dinosaurs ruling the Earth for 300 million years. And, finally, then they die out because of the comet. And we've got human beings that if there's a God that can do anything, none of this is needed. And I would say that arguing that there's a God who used natural forces to bring about a certain desired outcome, well, why necessary for a God? If natural forces can do it, then there's no need for a God. Then there's no need for a God. So, yeah, I thought Alex presented a really good argument there. God is constrained by physical laws. It goes against what is being said about the God of classical theism being all powerful. An all powerful God is like a magician with limitless magical powers, could do anything, could just manifest anything, could manifest millions and billions of universes with humans and other creatures in that universe that love and worship this God. An infinite being, if God's infinite, um, could do that. One would think, and anything less than that, surely ontologically, wouldn't be a God. But this is the God that Francis Collins believes in. That there's a God who used nature and natural forces and fine-tuned everything to arrive at an interesting outcome, something which he says is an interesting outcome. Okay, it's an interesting outcome from our point of view because we got a vested interest in it. We're interested in ourselves and we project that onto a God. Who's to say that there isn't a God out there that values infinite space, right? That there's a beauty in space itself, uncluttered with polluting human beings and all the suffering that goes with it. Who's to say that there wouldn't be a God that would just value solitude? So when he says that there's a God that did all this to make an interesting outcome, he's talking about from a human being's point of view. So I don't really accept that kind of bias, that a completely empty universe with nothing in it. There's no reason why that shouldn't be as interesting to a God as the kind of universe which we've actually got. And the obvious answer to this is you get around that problem by, well, reality seems to be consistent with there being no God. And there are other reasons to believe this, as Alex said about the problem of suffering, particularly with the suffering of animals. I think that is actually a really good, strong argument. It's he described natural processes as being brutal. And actually, Francis Collins said, oh, well, it's not really so brutal. Well, they would have died anyway, all these animals. What does it matter how they died? They would have died anyway. Yeah, but that's not the point, is it? Because you can blame human beings for violating God's law, and therefore we attract the suffering. But what have animals done? Animals suffer more brutal deaths in nature than human beings. They get torn apart and everything. And if there's a benevolent God out there, why not construct a universe in which animals who don't deserve to suffer don't suffer in such a way? Why create a universe in which we've got, say, an antelope and a lion, and the only way that lion can sustain itself is to tear apart an antelope and pull out all its guts while it's lying down there looking at itself being eaten up in agony? Why construct a universe where that happens? Again, reality seems to be more consistent with there being no God than with there being a God. Okay, right. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, so we've got nobody adding to chat. It's all right. You don't have to say hello or anything. I'm just wondering if chat actually works. Usually when I do a live stream, somebody says something. But anyway, okay. So I thought that Alex rebutted Francis Collins quite well. Um, there's some things that Alex said that I didn't like. So, for example, he was talking about how there are scores for theism and scores for atheism. For example, the score for theism, let's score 1 for theism because the universe exists. No, I don't agree. I don't agree that the existence of the universe adds any credence at all to the to theistic claims. I don't agree that is scoring 1 for theism. It's scoring 0 for theism, and frankly, it's also scoring 0 for atheism. Excuse me. Okay, so yeah, just coming back to Francis Collins, he was saying, "Oh, it's not as brutal as you make out." Well, that's absolute nonsense. As Alex said, go and watch David Attenborough. And David Attenborough has said that we leave a lot of footage out because it's just too brutal to be seen. Yeah, of course. Right. Okay, let's see. Let me just look at my notes. Okay, so then they moved on to the resurrection. Yeah, so they discussed fine tuning. And yeah, I mean, my point about fine tuning is no, I don't believe in, excuse me. Sorry. I don't believe in fine tuning. I don't think that it's a reasonable explanation because, well, first of all, it's taken 13.8 billion years for this fine tuning to get us to where we are. And it might have been that had there not been some chance abiogenesis event, it might have been the case that there never was, that there might not have been any life, and it might just be a lucky chance. We don't know that the universe could have developed any other way than how it has done. So all these attempts to codify into impressive big numbers and mathematics say, oh, if gravity had been slightly different, then this wouldn't happen, that wouldn't have happened. I mean, Alex did make some good points. He said, well, gravity could have been slightly different and everything still would have more or less developed the way that it did do. So yeah, but we've got no way of knowing whether we've got only one universe, so we can't go and look at lots of other universes to see how they developed. And it may well be that the universe has developed. If the universe had developed in some other way, then there might still be life, but it might be different. It might not be us. It might be something else. So yeah, we don't know. We've only got an example of one. So to claim that something was fine-tuned kind of assumes that there are lots of other universes out there that weren't fine-tuned, or it could have the universe could have developed in some other way, and the constants could have been different. And there's no real evidence for that. I mean, I always think it's a bit like if you take, I mean, look, if you take a boulder and you roll it down a hillside, and I don't know, by some lucky chance, let's say that I don't know, let's say there are pools of water at the bottom. Say there are half a dozen pools of water at the bottom, and this boulder happens to land in one of these pools, pointing in a particular direction. You could say, it's landed in that particular pool, and it's pointed in that particular direction. It's oriented in that particular way. What are the chances of that happening? How did it come to land in that pool and not some other pool? And then you go and look and say, well, it hit that rock. What are the chances of that rock being there, that it could take that path? Well, let's work that out. And you realize that actually the chances of that boulder landing exactly oriented in that particular way are probably billions to one against. And it's the same thing. Yeah, you're inventing odds and you're inventing a solution after the fact. And this is what Christianity does. This is what Islam does with all the prophecies. They retrospectively look at prophecies and try to match something after the fact, and we see this dishonesty and this sleight of hand in definitely in Judaism, in Christianity, and also in Islam, mainly the three main monotheistic religions. Okay, so let's just have a look at what Collins says about why he believes in the resurrection. This guy, for somebody who's educated, he doesn't really know very much about his own religion. I know more about how the New Testament developed and how we think we know, for example, that the apostles all died in horrible ways. I mean, I've done more research on that. I've had to, because I've had Christians on my channel saying, "Oh, all the apostles, they died absolutely agonizing deaths, and they wouldn't have done that for a lie." That's why a lot of people believe they believe that. And Francis Collins believes it as well. He said, "Look, you've got 12 apostles. Okay, Judas took his own life, but the rest of them, they all died horribly for their beliefs. They would have only been prepared to sacrifice themselves if Jesus had really risen from the dead and they'd seen him and they were convinced 100% that Jesus really rose from the dead. Then you'd be prepared to die horribly." And Alex quite rightly said, "Well, this is where I think Alex should do some more research, because this is one of the things that Christians say, and you've got to be ready and know what the source of this information is." So Alex quite rightly said, "Yeah, but how do we know this?" Now, Colin said, "Oh, I don't really want to debate that. To me, the Gospels is a beautiful thing, and I don't want to waste time debating it." Well, I'm sorry, but why did you come onto this show where you're debating an atheist? And this is one of the key This is one of the key lines of evidence for the resurrection. Well, not just one of the only real line of evidence for the resurrection are the Gospels. Let's face it. And yeah, so Alex said, "How do we know this about the apostles dying horribly for their beliefs?" Because this is something that Francis Collins brought up after Alex had really knocked down his other arguments, namely that in the earliest gospel, Mark, there's no resurrection. No, there's no resurrection. I think the stone has been rolled away, and there's no resurrection in the earliest gospel. This was later added. So why do the Gospels disagree, etc.? And why is there no resurrection in the earliest Gospel, which is, I think, a source for two of the other ones? And yeah, Alex made some really good points. And then Francis Collins said, "Well, I don't really want to debate that, because to me, the Gospels are a really beautiful thing. And I don't want to get bogged down in debating these points, because, I feel that it's true, etc. And the sheer beauty of the Gospels." Yeah, so this point about the apostles going to their deaths, what's the source for that? Because Alex said, yes, Judas dies. We know how Judas dies. And I think one of the Gospels mentions how one of the apostles dies. But there's no evidence that, for example, if you renounce Christ, you can live. There's no kind of evidence that they would have had a choice, that if they'd been seen with Jesus, it wouldn't be like, well, if you renounce Jesus and sign this document and say that he's not the king of the Jews, he's not divine, we will let you go. Otherwise, we're going to behead you, or we're going to hang you upside down, or whatever. There's no evidence that that kind of choice was ever made. And uh, I mean, in those days, I suppose the Romans could pretty much do what they wanted with you. They could kill you very quickly after a very short legal process, with relatively little evidence, and you wouldn't have any say in it. Like, okay, look, all right, let me live. I don't believe in Jesus. I don't believe Jesus was divine. He's not the king of the Jews. The guy's an imposter. Uh, I don't think that would have washed, because I think that had they said that, they would have said, no, you're trying to fool the court. You're going to be crucified or whatever. But anyway, yeah, so how do we know that the apostles died? I'll tell you how we know. Because in the 2nd century BC, there were people called church fathers, the early founding fathers, who never met Jesus. They weren't alive when he was alive. And all the going on is hearsay, or this is just something which is in the church tradition, that the apostles were martyred and died but there's no real proper historical evidence that really any of them ever died, let alone that they died believing that Jesus had really resurrected. And yet, Francis Collins has not done this research, and I've done this research, but he hasn't, because he didn't know. He didn't say, well, because when Alex said, how do you know this? He says, oh, well, there are accounts, but he didn't say, well, the early founding fathers, first century, second century after Christ, etc. This was church tradition in much the same way that the names of the evangelists on the Gospels, that's also tradition. No evidence that those individuals actually wrote. The apostles, on pain of death, had a chance to deny Jesus, and they decided to die anyway. It doesn't matter, because we've got martyrs from the Middle Ages who were burned alive for their beliefs, believing that Jesus is real and believing that Jesus resurrected 1500 years after the fact. We've got people dying at the stake. People will die for things which they earnestly believe, even though they haven't experienced it. We know this. I mean, we know it from 9/11. They died, didn't they? They died believing that they were doing work for Allah, and they believed probably that they'll be rewarded in heaven, in Islam heaven, for what they did. And yet they haven't experienced. They they weren't around when Muhammad was writing down the Quran, and the martyrs who've died over the ages, they also weren't around when Jesus was supposedly resurrected, yet they believe in the resurrection. There are people alive today who believe in the resurrection, that if you ask them to deny the resurrection or die, they would choose death, and yet they haven't got good evidence for the resurrection. So yeah, people dying for their beliefs is not good evidence that those beliefs are true. And I'm surprised somebody of Francis Collins' intelligence doesn't understand that. Okay. Well, I think he does understand it, but as he said, he just doesn't want to debate it. He doesn't want to know. Okay, so let's have a look. Yeah, and then of course Francis Collins came back to this thing. Look, I don't want to debate it. I believe it. I can't 100%. I can't 100% prove that it's true, and I don't 100% believe that it's true. But then he says, let's go to Occam's razor for the resurrection. The resurrection seems best to fit the facts that we know. Really? Well, what facts do we know from the four Gospels that we can verify properly by historical method? Actually, very, very few. I think that he overestimates. He's talking about this book written by Tom Wright that's got apparently 800 pages. And this is where the bias of the host came in, because Collins said, oh, if you would read Tom Wright's wonderful book, 780 pages, maybe you would see on the resurrection why it's real. Maybe you would understand why I also accept it. Well, I'm sorry, but it's unreasonable to expect people to read 780 pages to be convinced that the resurrection is real. I personally don't think that that's necessary. And as Collins came to this book already as a believing Christian, frankly, it was pretty much pointless him reading it. I don't know. I don't think it's necessary, because we've got a supernatural event here that contradicts the laws of nature. And no matter how long a book is, it's never really going to convince me. A book is not going to convince me that the resurrection really happened. And I don't think I could be convinced unless Jesus literally appeared before me right behind now on this live stream, and he had holes in his hands. And if that happened, then yeah, I might be able to entertain the idea. And also, if he was speaking Aramaic and I couldn't understand him, yeah, that would be interesting. Sadly, nothing like that ever happens. So yeah, with this Tom Wright, oh yeah, Tom Wright, you should read his book. The host, this guy from, what do you call it? What's the name? Mighty Pursuit. Yeah, the host said, oh, he's an Oxford man, isn't he? I mean, like, the fact that Tom Wright studied at Oxford and he's an Oxford academic somehow makes his book on the resurrection more credible, and that the resurrection really happened. So he's appealing to authority there. You know, there are a lot of people at Oxford that believe really stupid things. And I've been to Oxford. I've actually stood in one of the chapels where they sing evensong. And I mean, guess what? There was nobody in that chapel. There was a fantastic choir. and there was nobody else there singing evensong except me and that choir. They sang beautifully, but they were singing for themselves. And I don't know whether they're all Christians, but yeah, of course there are. You will find plenty of Christians at Cambridge University, at Oxford. We know that C.S. Lewis was a Christian, and I've done some videos on his writings, and I've critiqued them. I think he's wrong. I think he's got bad standards of evidence, and I think Francis Collins, and I think that Alex believes that Francis Collins, and argued that he had bad standards of evidence, but he didn't say it in those words. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And of course, Alex said about that, oh, yeah, he's from Oxford, isn't he? And Alex said, oh, yes, he is from Oxford. I mean, like, so what? Big deal. It's not where somebody's from when it comes to arguing for the resurrection. It's whether they've produced any new evidence. And unless I'm told that there's some substantial new evidence in that book, not just a manipulation of existing believers, then I'm unlikely to be interested in it unless there's something principally new in it. I've read books before about the resurrection, and if you take Bart Ehrman, he's somebody like Bart Ehrman would be familiar with all the new scholarship on the resurrection, and it would be really interesting if he appeared and said, "Yep, dang, that resurrection really happened. Tom Wright has proven it, in my opinion, to a very high standard of evidence." Yeah, that would be interesting, and I might well pick up that Tom Wright book and read it if I've got a recommendation like that. Yeah. Okay. So what else have we got? Well, I think that's more or less about it. Yeah, just Alex saying that about personal experience. So yeah, Alex saying that yeah, personal experience is a legitimate way to believe in the existence of God. Um, I'm not really too sure if I agree with that. I don't really think that one could have any. I think it's unlikely that one could have any kind of experience that could justifiably convince one that there is actually a God that exists. I'm willing to be proven wrong on that. And if any of you guys are Christians, get on your knees, say your prayers that me, Stuart, the unrepentant atheist, yep, that's me, can be saved, save my soul. Let me have a personal experience that you've had. Let Jesus appear to me, and I'll be the first one on here repudiating everything that I've said. And I will say, I was wrong. There is a God. There is a Jesus. I'm now a Christian. So, yeah, if you're a Christian out there, and I've asked Christians to do this, I've asked ministers to do this, pray for me that I might have a personal experience. God can reveal himself to me. I'm a non-resistant atheist as well. But nothing, absolutely nothing. I've even been to church and taken communion and felt nothing, nothing at all, just bread and very poor quality sweet wine. Okay, so I'm about to wrap up this live stream. So yeah, I thought it was quite a good conversation between the two. And Alex is giving away a lot, but he's not giving away his position really, that he's an atheist. I know he calls himself an agnostic, but I think that he's trying to make himself more palatable to all his millions of Christian fans out there. Okay. Well, okay, look, thank you very much for watching. I'm signing off now. Celestial Moon, thanks for your comment, but I don't think that's something which I'll address another time. I suppose the obvious answer to that is Celestial Moon, that there's no God, or there's some bizarre reason that God won't reveal himself. Yeah, so until God does reveal himself to me, then, or there's some other evidence which convinces me, I think I'm justified in my non-belief. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.